Hi everyone and welcome back to the garden. So today was bulb planting day. I didn't shoot any video of me planting bulbs because I find planting videos in a lot of instances kind of boring. So for those of you who wanted to see that, I'm sorry. But it took me all day, and those type of videos take a really long time to edit. And so I'm gonna walk around and show you where I planted some things just so you can get an idea of what I was going for. I simply used my power planter and pro plugger that I've showed you before. Let me go grab them, so if you've never seen any of those, you'll know what I'm talking about. So this is the power planter. It's basically a plant auger, and I have a big auger on it that I use for like the bigger daffodils, and then I have this smaller one that I use for some of the smaller bulbs. I accidentally bought this one first originally when I purchased my power planter probably 3 years ago, and this is the first time I've used it. It's been in its container, or its little box that it came in this whole time, so I broke it out and it was perfect to plant the little tiny bulbs. And then we also have the Pro Plugger here, which is the device you just step on. It's got a handle and it stacks the plugs up in the tube, and then you can dump them out and recap the bulbs when you're done. It has a different depth adjustment on the bottom, and I really like this one for planting plugs, and it also works really good for bulbs or like fixing bare spots in your turf grass to the extent you have a spreading grass. Now I planted 450 bulbs today. Some of them, it was around exactly 450. I'd lost a couple of them due to them desiccating, but 450 seems like a lot. And actually, if you're planting, it depends on how you're planting them. If you're digging a hole for each bulb and you're not using something like an auger to do it, then yes, it's going to take you a really long time. I still spent probably 5-ish hours out here planting 450 bulbs, and some of that was because they were in really difficult spaces. We've had really dry weather, so the ground was really hard in some of the areas. So it just really depends on your soil conditions and how you're planting them. Some of them I actually took the auger and like dug really close holes and pulled a bunch of dirt out and then planted them all in the ground at once. And I did that on some of the daffodils mostly. And so let's just walk around and show you kind of some of the places where I stuck them. I don't necessarily remember which variety I put in every place, but I'll show you kind of what I was going for. So in this area are the wee white hydrangeas. I might be substituting these out for tiny quickfire next year if I can get my hands on a bunch of small ones. The wee whites I've pulled out of my garden up front. They just burn really bad, and so these might actually do okay eventually under the shade of this maple, but it's going to take a while for any of these to get any substantial shade. So a lot of this area that I planted bulbs is currently considered full sun. In the future, when this maple grows up, it'll obviously be more shady, so I don't know how they will do. But in this area is where I planted the Woodland blend primarily, and that's just a bunch of daffodils and some crocus and some other small things just to kind of fill in, because they bloom really early, and so it'll be before this hydrangea foliage has come on, hopefully, and just add some color into the center of this boxwood circle that will eventually be pruned into a hedge someday. I put a big grouping of daffodils right here on the corner in this space. I stuck some hyacinths, a little drift of hyacinths in here, and some more daffodils here. And so I tried to add these things where I just knew there would never be any plants, and also kind of in areas that were out of the way. And so I continued a little bit of the Woodland blend right in front of these boxwoods because they stay super short. I think the max was like 7 to 9 inches on that blend, and so they're really, really tiny plants. And then I came through and kind of tucked some here and there along the corners of this walkway as well. This area, I dug out a pretty good spot and put a bunch of the 𝗣𝗟𝗘𝗢 right here, the big yellow daffodils, so it'll be a nice clump. And then behind here, I pulled out all of these Daisy May daisies that I had transplanted earlier last year because they just don't do well in my garden. So I pulled all of them out and I got to throw them away. But I filled this area with some small tulips called Charm Offensive, I think, are the ones I planted right here. So it's a yellow daffodil that'll be really pretty. If these aren't Charm Offensive, it's another variety I planted. I can't remember exactly, and it's only been today, but with all these different varieties, I tried to clump them together so it looks more natural rather than pairing a bunch of different colors in the same spot. My dream for this location behind me, let's see if I can get some better shade here, is to fill it with 𝗣𝗏𝗄𝗧𝗦. Now this place or this space will get quite a bit of sun in the coming years until this dogwood grows up. But after this dogwood grows up, even now, I think it gets some protection from these shrubs that are back here. So I'm going to fill this entire area with 𝗣𝗏𝗗𝗡𝗢. I think it will be really beautiful next to the fountain. I already started some plugs here, and I think I'm going to order some more plugs, and I might try and get those in the ground before fall. So you can see I stuck a couple plugs here from earlier this year as well. But if I fill this with yellow, like all gold is what I'm thinking, 𝗣𝗏𝗗𝗡𝗢, it'll be really beautiful. And then I have those 𝗩𝗥𝗡𝗏𝗡𝗢𝗡 geraniums that will kind of pair with that, and it'll mix nicely with all this different shrubs and foliage I have here. This area looks really rough because it's where I dug out the roses and some other plants, and I needed to come through and add some mulch. I'm not sure that I'll get to that this fall, but I planted some Geums in here. This is Pretty Coat's Peach, I think it's called, the other day, and in between those I stuck some more daffodils. So they're just spaced kind of evenly between these Geums, and they'll grow up and come up early, bloom early. This is the 𝗍𝗛𝗓𝗡𝗧 variety. And then as they die down, the Geums will kind of take over and cover up the old foliage, hopefully. I did do two little groupings right here of, I can't remember exactly what variety that is, but I did the same thing on the other side of the stairs as well. This is all grass that I planted to try and cover this area. I've never had good luck with it coming up because the dogs always trample over it, but it's coming up really good this fall. So I'm hoping this is keeping the dogs away, and I'll leave this up through winter, or at least blocked so the dogs won't destroy it. This might be something I have to have a stone landing added because it just gets so much traffic and the dogs just kill it off really bad, and it ends up a muddy mess over winter. So that's what I'm trying to resolve here, if anyone's wondering. Along all these Heucheras here, I planted some daffodils, various daffodils, and some hyacinths kind of intermingled between the perennials. I did plant a few daffodils out here. It's kind of like a woodland theme that I want to do. I did not get as many out here as I wanted, and so that'll be something that I may add next year. The ground was really, really hard to dig out here because it's willow and the drought we've had for the past few weeks. So it was really hard to dig in. That's one reason I didn't plant more, but I did put some here that'll come up early. So I picked a lot of early blooming daffodils, mainly so the blooms will be there and gone before a lot of the perennials come up, hopefully. I'm not an expert on bulbs or pairing bulbs with perennials, so this is really my first big foray into bulbs, and I explained why in a few videos ago. But I'm trying to pair them nicely in areas where their foliage after the blooms are gone won't necessarily impede or look messy in a space. And so that's what I'm focused on. So we'll see how these do this year, and if I have good success with these, I'll know and kind of keep an eye on when they bloom and how they match with the perennials that I already have in the garden for future years when I want to add more bulbs to my garden. I did dot some of them around in here. Some of the woodland blend I put around the edges just here, tucked them in the pathway a little bit. There's not a ton here because I'm going to come through and put some more of the 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 I tucked a few around this juniper that I showed you the other day. I did a kind of a big grouping right here. I think this is the big yellow 𝗣𝗟𝗘𝗦 variety I planted there. And then some just like 3 or 4 bulbs in tiny groupings here, there. I think there was one around in here somewhere. And then a few on the entrance to this path as well. Now I did focus a lot of my planting in the backyard. That's kind of an area where I've put a lot of energy the past couple years because it's where I spend most of my time. It's where I shoot most of my videos. I did add things up front though, and most of those were snowdrops and hyacinths. I didn't add a whole lot of daffodils up there. I've had issues with daffodils flopping because they don't get enough sun in winter in the front, and so I tried to just do the snowdrops up there. But I did put some snowdrops around these evergreens here at the beginning of this pathway, and I kind of meandered them between these evergreens as well, and so they'll just be a nice little touch in winter. They probably won't be able to be seen that much because I don't enter this side of the yard in winter, obviously, because there's nothing to do here in cold Ohio in the garden, but it'll be a nice little touch here if I do meander through this way. I didn't add any bulbs in this area except I think I tucked a few snowdrops right here. This is an area that I just really want to fill out, and we'll see how it looks in future years if I have areas to stick bulbs. My goal, of course, in this area was not to have any area to stick anything. I want a complete ground coverage here so we don't have to worry about weeds on this hot part south side garden, but we'll see how it does. And then in the front, I focused on just kind of filling gaps, and so I came through and put some hyacinths in this corner right here, and then I lined like the front of these boxwoods in between these mahogany monster heuchera with snowdrops. And so I got to come through and start my garden cleanup tomorrow. I've got this creeping Jenny everywhere, which I have contained to this bed, but snowdrops in front here I think will look really nice. And then I tuck snowdrops all around the sidewalk here that'll be really pretty in early or late winter, early spring. And then I carried some snowdrops down that way and down this way. This area I think is going to be a project for next year as well. So I planted all of this moss 3 to 4 years ago now, and a lot of the soil that has been around here has washed away. And so the stone has been sinking a little bit. You can see tree roots coming through, lots of weeds, because I don't typically use this as a pathway, but the delivery people tend to walk through my yard and through on this pathway, and so it's kind of annoying. I might actually put a tiny fence around the front, a little black decorative fence, so they won't do that. But it leads to lots of grass and weeds in this area because there's a lot of traffic. And so this is an area I need to come through and work on next year. It's not looking great to my eye. I might come through and add some ajuga to kind of control some erosion around the sides here. And this might be an area that I revamp next year. I don't know. It may not be something I want to tackle, but it is something I need to work on. And before winter, I'm going to come through and pull out all these weeds. This is of course the north side, so it doesn't get a lot of sun, and I didn't want to waste bulbs over here so much. But just for the spring, I tucked a couple here, so there'll be a small bunching. And then I planted some bulbs, some daffodils under this Ninebark on standard. And I pulled out the plants that were here. And what I have for as an idea for this area as well is to plant it with 𝗣𝗟𝗗𝗘𝗢. It's the variegated 𝗣𝗟𝗗𝗘𝗢, which I found some plugs at the discount plant sale from earlier this year, and I tucked those in there. Probably order some more of that and fill the space, or go buy some at a garden center, what's left over this fall. But the plants that I pulled up in here, I just tucked a few daffodils where those plants came up. And so the daffodils will grow up early in the spring or late winter. They will bloom, and then their foliage can die back among the 𝗣𝗟𝗗𝗘𝗢 that I have here. And that's kind of the design I was going for here, so I don't necessarily have to worry about coming through and trimming off daffodil foliage, hopefully. Hopefully the 𝗣𝗣𝗗𝗘𝗢 will kind of take over and disguise that for me. And then I tucked a few daffodils or woodland blend right here at the entrance of the stair steps into the patio. And that was pretty much it. I did consider coming through and putting daffodils in this spot because I think it would look really nice, but I really want to see and give these heuchera an opportunity to grow up. They look really sad. They were planted from plugs this year, but I'm hopeful that they will put on a lot more growth next year. And so I need to come through and weed all of this area. I'll be doing lots of garden cleanup now that I've got everything planted. But to the extent there are any gaps next year in that heuchera bed, I may come through and put daffodils next fall. I want to give those heuchera a good time to grow in and kind of fill that space and see what space, if any, there is. Because heuchera do, or somewhat semi-evergreen here, you do need to come through and kind of clean them up after winter because some of the leaves get kind of bad looking, but they do hold their leaves over winter for the most part. So I tried to put daffodils where I have like older garden spaces this year, and so in the future I can add more bulbs. 450 was kind of a reasonable amount. I was really concerned about how many there were, but to get them all done in a day, not too bad actually. So a lot of them, of course 200 of those were the woodland blend, and another 100 of those were snowdrops, and so 300 out of the 450 were tiny bulbs, which made it super quick and easy to do, but daffodil bulbs were a little more complicated. But I'm going to go in and rest up and get ready for starting garden cleanup tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to tackle it as early as we can, as long as the sun's still keeping us warm outside, and come through and weeding primarily. I'm going to start perennial cut back, and I've already trimmed back. I will probably come through and actually prune some of my hydrangeas this fall, which I've never done, but I posted a video late winter, I think, or early spring when we had this freeze, and it kind of broke some of the branches on these hydrangeas. And so although they provide winter interest, they are really floppy this year, and so I'm not going to leave those blooms over winter. I think I'm going to prune them all off, and so that way it'll be clean, something I won't have to worry about in spring so much. And if I need to come through and make adjustments to pruning in the spring, I can, and it'll be easier. But for now, to protect them so they don't get any heavy winter ice or snow and break the limbs, I think it's best that I start some of that cleanup this fall, which is, different for me. Thank you guys for joining me. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Bye.